What's up, Bears fans? Welcome into Chicago Bears Now. My name is Harrison Graham, and on today's show, let's take a look at some trade targets. The NFL trade deadline is just over a month away, and we'll do more videos like this, take a look at some players they could trade for, trade away, rumors that'll pop up around the trade deadline, and on today's show, we'll take a look at 5 trade targets Ryan Poles could consider to bring to Chicago. Before we get to that list, help us out. Trying to get to 104,000 subscribers. Your guys' support over the years has been incredible, and to start this season has really been amazing. So thank you guys so much to everyone who's subscribed already. Some of you may not have notifications turned on, so do that if you're subscribed. And if you haven't, hit that sub button, turn on the notification bell. We're trying to get to 104,000 by the end of Sunday's watch party when the Bears take on the Panthers. So rock and roll with us here on Chicago Bears Now. We would greatly appreciate it. All right, Brandon Scherff, the first name on my list, 33 years old, so he's certainly a little bit older, but he's been a quality guard for a long time now. He's probably not at the peak of his powers, but you look at a team like Jacksonville, who's 0-4, pretty good chance they're going to fire Doug Peterson. He's a free agent after this year. This is the type of player they might look to unload at the deadline and take, a 6th-round pick for, right? Like, I'm not trading a day 2 pick for a 33-year-old guard who's good but not great. But if your offensive line is still struggling 2 or 3 weeks from now, but you're hanging in there, you got a chance to make a playoff push, this is a guy that you could just kind of plug and play at right guard. You could bring him in here. He's your right guard. I like what Matt Pryor's been doing, but he's a career backup for a reason. Who knows when Ryan Bates gets back? Does he play guard? Does he play center? Is he just a backup? Scherff has a much longer proven track record than a lot of the guys on the Bears offensive line. And by the way, the cap hit would be less than $2 million for the remainder of this season. And if he plays well, maybe he's a guy you bring back on a 1 or 2 year deal, and all of a sudden you've kind of just run into a solution on your offensive line, not only for the second half of this season, but maybe beyond. So I would be interested in Brandon Scherff, PFF grade 62.3, so average, above average. Hasn't been great this year, but he has a long track record and he knows how to play. He would be a stabilizer at right guard at the very least. All right, let's go to another offensive lineman. Austin Corbett, who's playing center this year for the Panthers, has played a lot of guard in the past as well. Didn't play very well last year, but before that he's been pretty steady. I would put him in like the above average quality starter. Like, good player, not far off from like what Nate Davis was in Tennessee, not what he's been in Chicago. Like, good, not great player, but only 29. This year he's playing really well at center, above average level, position that he's playing full-time for the first time. His cap hit would be less than $4 million for the remainder of this season, and that goes down by the week, every game he plays. Also free agent after this year, and if they like what they've seen from him at center, and let's be honest, Coleman Shelton, not a long-term solution at center. Ryan Bates, that would just be a guess if you think he's a long-term solution at center. Austin Corbett is at least at minimum a starting caliber guard, and this year he looks like a starting caliber center. So maybe he could be an answer beyond this year that eliminates one problem that you've had for years now, which is just god-awful center play, if we're being completely honest. Grading out well this year. Carolina, who you play this week, you'll have an up-close look at him, see how he performs against Billings and Dexter. If he holds up there, that would be a good kind of green check mark. And look, I don't know if Carolina would trade him to Chicago, given the last time these two teams traded, but new regime, if Carolina's trying to add draft picks, you would certainly think they would consider it. I don't know what he'd cost, maybe like a 4th-round pick, but you'd have to wait and see at the deadline. But the reason I started with 2 offensive linemen is, one, it's hard to find quality linemen that would actually be tradable, so you have to look at bad teams. And 2, the O-line just hasn't been very good. That's just the simple truth of the matter. I still think defensive line is an area you could add, and albeit the Bears' defensive line has performed better than any of us thought, but there's still, some moments where, you go a few plays, like where's the pass rush? The run defense has been average at times. Well, how about Shelby Harris, veteran defensive tackle, 33 years old. He's also a free agent next year. I'd probably view this more as like a rental. So I don't think you'd pay that much to get him, late day 3 pick, but less than $2 million against the cap. And I think he would elevate your defensive tackle room pretty significantly. He probably wouldn't start because I don't think you'd want to mess with the Billings-Dexter combo, but he can play 1-tech, he can play 3-tech. He'd just be better than Zach Pickens, who's been hurt anyway. And if he needed to start due to an injury, he'd be able to do that. Whereas right now, let's be honest, if Dexter or Billings went down, you don't have a guy that you feel comfortable plugging in there as a starter. They traded for Chris Williams from the Browns, did a late-round pick swap, and he's been okay, but he's a fringe rosterable player. Shelby Harris would be a notable upgrade. And you look at Cleveland, if they continue to pile up losses, they've been very aggressive in adding players, they might look to go the other way here and get some draft picks back. And a guy like this to trade off for even a 6th-round pick for them would make a lot of sense. So I would look at a player like this at the deadline. If you're looking to beef up that interior, that shouldn't cost that much. Next up, if you want to go more of the younger route, a guy who's shown some promise but has had some injuries, but, with the fresh scenery, maybe he could take off a little bit, is Azeez Ojulari, speed rusher from the Giants. He's 6'3", 240, so a little bit smaller than what the Bears have, but that's similar size like a Darrell Taylor, who's come in here, hard worker, energy guy, was good in Seattle and has been good here. And this kid's only 24 years old. I loved him coming out of the draft a few years ago. He's battled some injuries, and the Giants stink. They're going to need to draft a quarterback, so adding more draft capital would make sense. I don't know, 5th-round pick for Ojulari. He's got 1 sack this year. I think he's got 5 pressures, so he's rotated well there. And one position the Giants are pretty deep at is defensive line. They traded for Brian Burns. They obviously have Kayvon Thibodeau. They're not going to trade him. So Ojulari, who's a free agent after this year, might be a guy they're willing to shed off because re-signing him probably doesn't make a ton of sense for them. And for the Bears, Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus, they like these high upside young guys. And Ojulari checks those boxes. He has a good athletic profile. So, I like him. I think he could come in and you would have him and Darrell Taylor on expiring contracts. Whoever plays better down the stretch, you probably just re-sign that player, right? And, ideally, whoever that is, that's your 3rd edge rusher. You've got Montez Sweat. I think Taylor's a good number 3. Ojulari could be a good number 3 if he's healthy. Maybe you draft someone to be your number 2 in the 2nd round or something like that. But, I don't think he'd cost you much. He's young. When he's healthy, he's flash potential and would give you another pass rusher to work with. You can never have enough of those. How about a familiar face? Khalil Mack, 33 years old, still getting it done, had 17 sacks last year, 2.5 so far this year through 4 games. Also a free agent. And while he's played well and Jim Harbaugh likes offensive and defensive linemen, if they get closer to the deadline and it's kind of clear, okay, we're probably a year away, they might be willing to trade a player like this because is he in their future plans? Now, he can obviously still play. They could certainly bring him back on a 1 or 2 year deal, but he'll be 34 next year. Does Harbaugh want to invest a lot of money into Khalil Mack? The Bears could bring him back as a rental, and, if he plays well, maybe you bring him back on a year-to-year basis after that. He liked playing in Chicago. He was productive here. I don't really know what he would cost in a trade. Would you have to give up a 3rd? I'd prefer not to do that. I kind of look back at the Robert Quinn to the Eagles trade. I think that was a 4th-round pick. Maybe it would be something in that realm. But I've loved Khalil Mack for his entire career. Very good player. And maybe he could have better playoff success here if he came back. I don't know if the Bears are going to be a playoff team this year. I think this would be only one you would do if you felt good about making a playoff push. Which right now, I think you're optimistic. You're 2-2, which is where I thought they'd be. But, in some areas, they're probably behind the 8 ball. So this is probably a let's see how things look really close to the deadline. Where are the Chargers, number 1? Where are the Bears? Are you a Khalil Mack away from making a legitimate playoff push? If you are, maybe that's worth a swing. You haven't been in the playoffs since 2020, and you kind of backed in that year. So really, you haven't been a high-level playoff team since 2018, which Khalil Mack was a big part of, and he's still playing at a high level. So I think this is more of a keep an eye on this one for both teams a month from now and see how it plays out. So there you have it. 5 Bears trade targets Ryan Poles could consider between now and the NFL trade deadline. We'll continue to pump out the latest Bears news, rumors, trade buzz, and much more. We'll be live this afternoon. Sometime between 3 and 4 Central. We might go live a little bit earlier due to scheduling issues here at Chat Sports. So Subscribe and turn on notifications so you know exactly when we go live. Plenty more coverage to come. Bear down.